Okay. The recording has started. Okay, all right. Let's begin. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Rita Hukayem, a proud NIPSIA alumni, and I'm so honored to co-moderate this session with my brilliant colleague Mada Eldebis, a Carleton alumni from the Graduate School of Public Administration and Policy. We would like to first begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is a traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. Before we start, we would also like to thank the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs, also known as NIPSIA, at Carleton University, its director, Professor Yagadisan Sami, and his assistant, Emma, for supporting us to organize this special event. This session today will be in English and will last for an hour. The agenda will allow us to have an interactive and thought-provoking discussion. We will begin by introducing the speakers. We will then hear from them individually about their experiences as women in Lebanon. After that, we will move to a dialogue session, followed by a question and answer period where attendees will have the chance to ask our panelists questions directly. Attendees, please feel free to ask your questions throughout the session, and our panelists will answer them during the question and answer period. So there's a box called Q&A. Please start asking questions as soon as you feel like you have them and put them in there. Now, to start, what is the purpose of this event? Well, as graduates with international relations and human rights backgrounds, we wanted to create an event for International Women's Day that amplified the voices of the resilient women who are fighting for a better tomorrow. We wanted to hear from their testimonials on the challenges they are facing and how we, as Canadians, as global citizens, and as people from all walks of life, can address effectively and sustainably human rights violations and inequalities happening in Lebanon and in the Arab world. As many of you know, this year's theme for International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge. Choosing to challenge gender norms, choosing to challenge the patriarchy, choosing to challenge inequality. We chose to showcase how the women in Lebanon are choosing to challenge the severe inequalities they are facing today and how they're exemplifying resilience and determination for change. Although Lebanon is often characterized as a liberal and democratic country in the Middle East, Lebanon is currently ranked as the bottom 5th country in female political representation, where less than 5% of elected officials in parliament are women. Women in Lebanon, like women all over the world, are experiencing heightened domestic violence, where 1 in 3 women experience sexual and gender-based violence in their lifetime. Child marriages, which means marriages under the age of 18, remain legal, and marital rape is still not considered a crime under Lebanese law. Since the start of Lebanon's revolution in October 2019 and the horrific Beirut explosion that destroyed half of the city in August 2020, Lebanon is facing the worst economic and political crisis since its civil war and is expected that 70% of its population will experience poverty by the end of 2021. Nevertheless, despite being disadvantaged and intentionally marginalized, we have seen women in Lebanon continue to fight for their rights. 3 of these women are with us today, and I will turn it to Mada to present our speakers.
Okay. Thank you, Rita. Today, we have the pleasure to celebrate 3 incredibly inspiring Lebanese trailblazers, and I will say it was not an easy task to condense their bios to a few lines. Our first speaker will be Dr. Carmen Jaha. Carmen is an activist and associate professor of public administration at the American University of Beirut. She specializes in mass political mobilization and the challenges to political reform across the Arab, Middle East, and North Africa. She is co-founder of the Center for Inclusive Business and Leadership for Women at AUB, and she is also co-founder of Khaddit Beirut, the Shake Up which is a network of more than 150 experts implementing a community-driven roadmap to the recovery of Beirut following the explosion. And I would like to add that Carmen was my professor at AUB, and she was an educator and still is, who encourages critical thinking with her out-of-the-box ideas, because every class with her left us with more questions than answers. They were a call for us to actually think for ourselves and not conform to the norm. Our second speaker will be Jumana Haddad. We're happy to have Jumana with us today. Jumana is a writer, journalist, and activist. She's worked for Lebanon's An-Nahar newspaper. She also founded Al Jasad magazine, which was a quarterly Arabic language cultural magazine that specializes in the literature, arts, and sciences of the body, published until 2011. She taught creative writing at the Lebanese American University of Beirut, and in October 2018 launched her own TV show on Al Hurra channel, where she highlights cases of human rights abuses, censorship, repression, and discrimination in Arab countries. In 2019, she founded a youth-centered NGO called the Freedom Center that raises awareness among Lebanese youth on the values of human rights, democracy, and secularism.
Our third speaker will be Maya Shams Ibrahim Shah. Maya graduated from the American University of Beirut when the capital's downtown area was witnessing a complete transformation, and the original architecture and history were being disfigured. This is when she started her civil work. She later joined the Ministry of Culture in the aim of preserving heritage and passing a law to protect traditional listed homes. In 2019, she started her own charity organization called Beirut Beit El Baraka, offering support programs for retirees and vulnerable people living in dire conditions, and education programs for children. Today, the charity's database comprises hundreds of thousands of beneficiaries. Following the August explosion, Maya set out to repair over 3,000 apartments, 320 small businesses, 38 traditional listed houses, and 3 schools, all in a few months. In parallel, she launched a program for the rehabilitation of public spaces and community gardens as part of a campaign to reclaim Lebanon and the Lebanese multicultural identity. We are so honored to have you three, and thank you so much for making the time on such a busy day to be with us. I will now give it to Mada to start the questions.
Thank you. So we'll now hear from our panelists individually, and I'd like to start with Professor Jaha. I can't call her Carmen just yet. Can you please tell us about your experience with Lebanon's revolution and why, in your opinion, it has failed thus far to create the real change? We know that you've had a role. So can you please tell us about your role and the role of women and youth in pushing for reform and accountability?
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning to everybody in Canada. I'm really so honored and so excited and so proud to be here. I think this year I want to choose to challenge my sense of loneliness and my sense of helplessness. And that is a personal challenge that I want to test out during this panel with you. It's easy to sit here and lay out the different ways in which women are violated by the system. It's not a surprise that women were at the forefront of the revolution. We stand to lose the most if no change happens, and we stand to gain the most if change happens. Gender equality and women's political representation is the entry point for political change in Lebanon. And although what we are experiencing with financial collapse, violence, the explosion, the devastating explosion, and the pandemic, although what we experience may be an epitome in Beirut, we are not alone. And so the solace and what I want to present here today is while our experiences are indigenous, they are severe, but they're not unique. Women all over the world face discrimination at the workplace. All over the world, the rise of the gender-based violence because of the pandemic has been occurring in all of our cities. The question is how we take a local experience so severe, so intense that is Lebanese, but link it to like-minded individuals and institutions all over the world so that together we refuse to accept any political settlement in Lebanon today that does not advance gender equality. We don't want any reform or any new government if it's not going to advance gender equality. We're not going to make the mistake that happened after the Civil War. We were so drained, we said, anything, anybody, please just end the violence. We're not going to accept this today. We don't want any solution that doesn't have meaningful not token representation of women, not women appointed by sectarian leaders to advance their agendas, not women that are hired or allowed in just so that they can check the box off for donors. We want substantive, independent female voices, such as the ones that you have here today with Jumana and Maya. Should I speak more? I can speak a lot.
Thank you. No, I was just pressing the use button. Thank you so much. And yes, there's so much power to saying that if we don't do anything, we have so much to lose. And if we do something, we have so much to gain. And that couldn't have resonated more with us. Now
I still have a very quick one.
Oh,
sorry,
yes,
a very quick one.
Please. Yeah.
The revolution didn't fail, madam. There has been no moment in history has there been street protest met by police violence, political violence, explosion, pandemic, and the loss of our livelihoods. I don't think that the audience knows we lost all the money in our banks. So my father worked for 49 years and he can't access his money. The revolution didn't fail. There wasn't a political opening. And I think that we've done more than any revolution that I know. And I know this because I study Hong Kong and Chile and Gaza and Poland and Black Lives Matter. No one has been through what we've been through. We've ran in elections. We've organized in unions. We sat on the street. We picked each other up. I'm talking about picking bodies from under the rubble. We organized open spaces. We're supporting each other. We're raising money. Everybody that I know today, everybody who can afford it, is helping another household. The revolution didn't fail. The political class failed, and now we need to find another mode of resisting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Facts. And like, we know that it takes also time for change. Unfortunately, it can take years before change happens, but unfortunately at the detriment of people's lives, especially women and youth. Thank you, Dr. Jaha. Now moving on to Jumana. Jumana, can you please tell us about your experience in politics in Lebanon? And what are some of the challenges you faced running in the past parliamentary elections? And what is your message to aspiring Lebanese women who are considering a political career?
Hi, good evening, and a big thank you to everyone who organized this event tonight. Thank you, Rita, Mada, Carleton University, the School of International Affairs, and all the attendees. Where do I start? Let me start by saying the following. Being a Lebanese woman, a Lebanese feminist woman, big-mouthed, uncompromising, politically independent Lebanese feminist woman, and wanting to get involved in politics in Lebanon is like voluntarily entering a land full of mines. The amount of bigotry and prejudice that one faces, whether it is overt or hidden, deliberate or unconscious, sometimes with bad or good intentions, is unimaginable. I experienced the full package, the condescending pats on the back, even from teammates, the discouraging remarks, even from friends, the lack of faith in me succeeding, even from some family members. So it was demoralizing, to say the least. And I'm certain that other female candidates have faced the same challenges. And it is nothing less of a miracle that we kept on pushing and going till the end. In order to be brief, there are three main points I'd like to tackle on this level that were particularly unfavorable based on my own experience during the last elections. The first point was the absence of a gender quota. We all know that almost no country in the world did or can achieve proper political representation for women without an interim quota system set in place to ensure that. Yet, however hard we tried before the 2018 elections to push for such a quota, we were confronted with an inflexible resistance from most political parties, some of them taking hypocrisy to the level of claiming that women in Lebanon do not need a quota, it is insulting to them, blah, blah, blah. Those same parties didn't place any female candidates on their lists later on, or they put them on seats that they know they were going to lose. So the only group that ensured female representation on their lists was the civil society. Now, those who know me know very well, I'm not a big fan of positive discrimination, but let's be real. I strongly believe that a quota is unavoidable in a devious and sexist political climate like ours, because if we're going to wait until those parties adopt voluntary quotas, I fear that we'd have to wait until the next century or even later. Second point was sexism in the media. The way the media outlets handled female candidates was derogatory, to say the least. When it comes to politics, a woman is almost always merely a decoration. On one of my appearances, on my own appearances, for example, on Al Jadid, I remember the presenter's first comment to me was, "Oh, your campaign photo is beautiful." Instead of asking me about my program, it was like a 25 pages program where I explained my vision, what I wanted, why I was running for elections. I challenged him and asked him whether he would have said the same comment to a male candidate. And his pretext was that he was giving me a compliment. So just in order to explain to you a little bit how the mentality is. Traditional Lebanese media, I believe, is in dire need of a feminist overhaul on the level of both vocabulary and approach. I have to say that only the independent alternative media was sensitive to this issue. And on the level of media as well, I should mention how much airtime costs. It costs a fortune during elections, and most female candidates, and me included, cannot and could not afford it. The third and last point, in my experience, was unfortunately voter skepticism, especially female voters. Now, I completely and utterly refute the saying that woman is woman's worst enemy. I hate that, and I don't agree with it. But I have to say that it pained us women candidates to see how women voters were reluctant to give us their votes. What we know, however crooked, is better than what we don't know mentality had poisoned them. In addition to the fact that most of us are raised to believe that a woman's place is not in politics. It is a poisoning education that pushes women to doubt other women because they doubt themselves. So it is only normal that they doubt other women in politics. Yet, despite everything I said, and to answer your second question, I believe we must keep pushing the envelope and banging that patriarchal wall of discrimination and bigotry until it tumbles to our feet. We need more women in politics. So even though I explained all the obstacles, this doesn't mean that we should abstain from running and from winning the elections next time.
On that, thank you, Jouman. On that hopeful note, we'd like to turn to Maya. And we know Beit al-Baraka has done a lot, especially following the explosion. Can you please tell us about that response and how women and girls have had unique needs, and what are some of the trends that have disproportionately affected them in Lebanon, and how your organization is supporting them?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for organizing this. Thank you for having me part of this. First of all, when the explosion happened, one of the biggest problems that we had was making people feel secure, because the problem is many people found themselves without a roof, without a house. Many of the young people we work with, most of them, we have a large majority of women, because at the end of the day, Beit al-Baraka is a women-led organization. So I noticed that a lot of the young females who worked with us panicked a lot about household security. And this has to do with the issue of rape and theft. Where are all these families going to sleep? Where are the girls going to sleep? What do you do with 300,000 people who lost their homes? So this was the first automatic response we had to the blast. We later, 48 hours later, we opened our emergency relief center. So on the morning of August 6th, we were up and running, and we had already received in 48 hours something not far from 30,000 requests for help. And in every household, we had between 1 to 2 women or girls. Of course, there are many needs that come with this, but the problem was not just during the blast. The problem was an overall issue that is, if you want, somehow isolating women and mothers. So I'm going to talk about these two because these are more important than just the blast. The first problem that isolates women today is period poverty. This is something that we did not know of, and this is something I'm just learning recently because, you know, I haven't been in charity for a very long time, and I'm gradually learning about these things. Period poverty means that you have to count the number of women you have in your society. So if half of the women in Lebanon today are at risk of poverty, then you have half of the women of the population who have their period, half of them are poor, which means that this half is not going to leave the house for an entire week every single month of the year. So you have to imagine the repercussions on your GDP, because you have a working force that is no longer capable of working because they can no longer afford sanitary pads. This is one of the main problems that we're having. So we were able to coordinate with another NGO called Dawrati, and we were able to secure the needs of 200,000 women. Now, on the other hand, knowing that we have a database of 226,000 Lebanese people who are all above the age of 60 or below the age of 20, because I strongly believe that the people between these age brackets need to go and hit the streets to get their rights. We should not sit at home and get used to receiving the food box at the end of every month. This is what kills a revolution. This is what kills ambition. This is what kills the economy. So we just help the ones who have who are not in any position to go ask for their rights. But while distributing food and while distributing medicine, because we have 4 major pillars. So we pay school tuitions for 11,955 students. We offer food and hygiene care and medical support to the other 226,000 people. But then during the process, we realized something dramatic also that we discovered, just like period poverty. It's that with the increase in air pollution and stress, many young mothers are no longer able to breastfeed. And with the economic collapse that we've had, there is no more baby formula in Lebanon. So between being unable to breastfeed and between not finding any baby formula, even if they can afford it, we are facing a humanitarian crisis that no one is talking about now. I mean, of the 4 crises we have, this is the first and most dangerous crisis. It's the malnutrition of an entire generation, which means that, again, the repercussions on your GDP are going to be this time 1 million times stronger, because you're going to have an entire generation of young people who are going to be malnourished or not nourished enough, because today the trend has become to boil rice and put the water of the rice in the bottle. So basically what happens is that during the first year of growth of a baby, the brain will not be able to grow substantially and normally, which means that this person is going to have intellectual deficiency. This baby is going to become a slow learner, and then is going to be is not going to be able to contribute to the growth of the economy, and is going to be a burden on social security. So once again, we are hitting our GDP in so many bad ways, and this is so unbelievable. So these are the 2 main problems that we faced regarding girls and women. There are many, many more. I mean, we have problems with education. We're trying as much as possible to empower women in rural areas. We're empowering the women in the civil defense department. We just posted a story today about the women of the civil defense in Hrajil on our Instagram page. We try as much as possible to educate women in rural areas on domestic violence, on not allowing anyone to push their daughters to get married early, and all this while giving them a job. And this job consists of producing a crop on our land. We have 500,000 square meters of organic land on which we produce food that we're distributing to our elderly and children. So the people who work these lands, most of them are women in rural areas. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Maya, for sharing, for continuing to share the atrocities that are happening as we speak in Lebanon. And I do want to highlight to all the listeners that they can support the organization she founded, which is Beit al Baraka. We'll leave the link in the chat box. So if you would like to support, learn more about the work they are doing, I highly recommend it. And as you see, like every minute counts. We don't want to lose a generation. So whatever we can do to pull our weight, we will do. So thank you, Mada, Dr. Carmen, and Jumana for sharing these rich experiences with us, and for being the change we want to see in Lebanon and in the world when it comes to justice and equality. We hope that all your efforts will bear the fruit of change in Lebanon and in the region. Now, part 2 of the session. We would like to invite you all for a short dialogue centering on a call to action on what can we all do better. We have attendees listening today from academia, civil society, as well as government, and we would like them to hear about how they can be mobilized and how we can all make a difference. We're aware of these issues, only aware of the small percentage because there's so many more, but based on that, in your opinion, the question is, how can donor countries and the Lebanese diaspora better support women in Lebanon and empower the country to achieve economic growth? So I'll open up the floor. Whoever would like to go first, whether Maya, Dr. Carmen, or Jumana, and we'll have a fruitful conversation for the next 10 minutes about this. Who would like to go first?
Go ahead, Jumana.
Okay. I mean, in my humble opinion, if we want gender equality in Lebanon, just to resume it, we need women's issues to be constantly on the table and persistently on the table, which means we need more Lebanese women in politics. Actually, let me rephrase that. We need the right kind of Lebanese women in politics, feminist women politicians who care about women's rights, who consider these rights a priority, not the kind of women in power who avoid bringing up women's concerns because they fear it would make them seem less credible politicians, since politics are allegedly a man's business. On the other hand, if we want sustainable change and development in Lebanon, we need to detoxicate our political system, not only from corruption, which is obvious, but also detoxicated from religious influence. No real change will ever happen unless we move away from the current confessional system, the confessional representation, the confessional anxieties that are preventing the Lebanese from becoming a unified people and real citizens. And not to mention that sectarianism is a key tool in the hands of the corrupt leaders. They use it repeatedly to divide and conquer, to mobilize their factions with fear and hatred. And we must deprive them from that tool once and for all. Two important steps in that direction are a new electoral law that is not based on confessional representation and a civil code regulating personal status laws instead of the 15 different religious ones that we have right now and that are hugely detrimental to women, not to mention to all Lebanese, of course. Consequently, the most important thing that the diaspora can do for us, in my opinion, is to lobby, whether politically or financially, for the goals that I've just mentioned. More women in politics, less sectarianism. That would be my call to action for them. As for the donor countries, I would urge them to hold the government and official parties accountable on delivering what they have promised in return for the financial support they receive. So many problems in Lebanon would have been resolved if this had been done. One flagrant example that comes to my mind is the electricity sector. The amount of money received from donor countries for that sector alone would light up a continent, not just a tiny country like ours. But it all disappeared in the corruption pit because there wasn't enough liability. They knew that they could get away with it, and they did. So that would be my call to action to donor countries. Thank you.
Thanks, Rumana. I'm going to go next because I've been thinking about this for a very long time, and especially in the last 7 months. I want to build on what Maya said. First, I agree with Rumana, definitely. And I want to add the call for action because it's rare that somebody asked us, well, what would you like to see? I want to build on what Maya said on the eve of the explosion of people feeling not safe physically. They lost the rooftop or a limb or someone they love. Their job, the streets. Now I look outside at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. It's dark because there's no electricity, garbage, violence everywhere. I think that we need to pull the rug from under the politicians. Yes, they've been elected, but they've been elected by the power of weapons. Just because there is a majority in government doesn't mean that people need to pay the price for their failure. What you can do abroad and what we want you to invest in is not just sending money, but your expertise. You look around you, you live in a city, you see your loved ones living in a city, your colleagues. Imagine Lebanese people, they're living in a city that is as destroyed, and then think what you can do. What can you do to use your voice and expertise to support a rights-based approach on all issues? And rights-based approach is essentially gender. I'm going to make it very practical. Juxtaposed to how bad the government is, I do research on women in politics. I'm not as brave as Rumana. I didn't run. But one woman, she told me something. She said, the men don't even pick up the garbage. And every time we say we want change, they say, but we are the saviors. I want you to help us discredit them. They don't hold the monopoly on our global voice. There are institutions like Beit al-Baraka. There are myriad institutions working on all of the failures of government. Invest in institutions. Part of safety. Today, I don't know if I'm going to get a vaccine or if my parents will get a vaccine. I go on Rafiq Hariri Hospital and I listen to Dr. Firas Abyad because he's trustworthy. Invest in institutions, in schools, hospitals, civil society, youth networks, local businesses. Invest in institutions that can create a model like Beit al-Baraka as a model. You can take that and you can have 100 Beit al-Baraka. The catastrophe is so big, like Rumana Center, a Freedom Center. If she succeeds, she can open probably outside Lebanon. In Khaddad Beirut, we're working with clinics, schools, these small models of excellence. If we can build them and get people to live in an inclusive community, at the core of it is gender inclusion, women's voices, women-led, then we can scale these models. Then government, when there is a change, they can come and take a model. And then it changes the opinion of voters. As Rumana is saying, there's a lot of skepticism about women and about newcomers to politics, right? Always the warlords, there was a question in the chat whether the constitutional system is against women empowerment. Yes, because at the heart of it are religious institutions, and they are male dominated, weapons, media, and political parties. There's no voice for women. If we invest in institutions where the women are excelling, whether it is through media, unions, civil society, charities, any institution that is functional, that citizens can turn to and say, oh, I trust this person on environmental reform, oh, I trust this expert on economy. If you invest in merit, women will be more than 50% of this country. We need a quota for official elections, but we don't need a quota in society. We are much more than the 50%. So if you want to help invest in institutions, I don't mean money, I mean advocate. Say it's unacceptable that people, human beings, whether they are Lebanese or migrants or Syrians or Palestinians, it's unacceptable that human beings are taken hostage by a group of corrupt men. Invest in a narrative. Canada has a very good feminist international assistance policy. You can use that. You can use that to advocate, to lift the voice. Maybe in a month there will be no electricity and our internet will go down, so we can't have this webinar. So you need to be our voice. You need to be saying, there's a bunch of people elected by force that are controlling the lives and livelihoods of people. The entry point is gender-based inclusion and investing in institutions. And it's, you know, it's easy. Schools work, civil society works. And now there's always this question of you're trying to bypass the government, which I find very funny because we protested to have a government and they don't want to give us a government. But when we do well, they say civil society can't take the place of the government. So to close, I want to say, of course, civil society cannot take the place of the government, but it can create a model that is scalable, that can do more. And once Beit al-Baraka finishes Lebanon, they can go work in another country that needs help, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. Invest in institutions. And you will see successful institutions are gender inclusive and women-led. And if I'm wrong, yeah, take whatever you want.
I'm going to continue on what Dr. Jeha is saying now, because I think, first of all, I'm a very big fan of hers. And I might end up taking a class with you one day just to hear you talk.
My honor, Maya. We'll co-facilitate.
So what's absolutely fantastic is that there are specific models that are being born today in Lebanon. And just like Dr. Jeha said, it's these initiatives of people who have just discovered something that has been taken away from us, especially starting the 90s, because in the early 90s, you know that the Lebanese industry and agriculture have been completely destroyed, and the subsidies have been removed to the advantage of finance and tourism. And so everything changed. The identity of our country changed, the history, the buildings, the architecture. And all of this made a lot of civil movements start in the 90s and in the 2000s, but unfortunately, nobody would ever listen to us. Every time we protested for a historical house, we would end up in jail because it's usually for example, Randa Birri, who's behind destroying this house, or Solidaire, or whatever. So we had no place for us. But now the time has come. It's the right time with the right people who have been there for decades. I mean, at least for myself, before Beit al-Baraka, I've been there for 25 years, in and out of prison, with problems and intimidations and pressure, just to save a few buildings. And today, look at the extent of all the people who have joined us. And they, together with us, are repairing these old buildings. We're opening back these huge gardens, public gardens that are supposed to be the catalysts of change. And unfortunately, because the Beirut municipality does not want people to sit together and talk together, they have simply shut them down. So today, with the pressure of all the civil societies, the initiatives, people's demands, we have managed to open up these gardens. For example, now we have the Jesuit garden that we're working on. We have managed to raise $150,000 from the diaspora in order to do something that includes all the people of the Jaitawi area, and at the same time include people who come from Zahrani, very, very simply because there is a church that's buried in the Jesuit garden that dates back to the 5th century, and it was removed from Zahrani in the 70s when they did the pipelines. And they simply took it back, put all the mosaics and the columns in Jaitawi. So imagine on the day of the opening, where we're going to invite all the people from Zahrani and Jaitawi. They're going to sit together. They're going to read the biography of the Jesuit fathers who used to plant their crop there. I mean, this is so important for everyone to understand. While doing this work, and then automatically women will come along and just find their place. I mean, if you hit the streets on any night of the revolution, any night of protest, you're going to find that the first 100 people on the front line are women. It goes without saying. So preaching for women's rights comes through action. You don't need to say it, you need to work. And with your work, you're going to set a model. And women automatically are going to be the first to join, because women are multitaskers. They can do 100 different things at the same time. So no need to fight for your rights. Just do the right thing for your community, and then women will be attracted on their own. And what the civil society is doing today, and what we need from the diaspora, because guys, don't forget that at the end of the day, there are 15 million Lebanese living abroad. 1 million of them were registered to vote previously. Unfortunately, I think something like 40,000 ended up voting. It's peanuts. So first of all, the diaspora has to put a lot of pressure to make it easy, to make the process easy, because the government is going to make the process extremely difficult to vote for the diaspora, because they don't want you to vote. So you have to put pressure on your embassies. You have to find an easy way to be able to vote. And the second thing is, I have this amazing idea. I think about this every night, and I don't know how we're going to do this, but somebody has to do it. We need to get in touch with someone who can lobby, a public figure that is extremely important, because you know that today we're reliving a little bit what happened in 2005 when the Lebanese hit the streets and said, we want the Syrians out. It was just the time when George Bush was just there. He wanted to change his, do a good thing. It was kind of a marketing thing for him. And just at the same moment, you had all these Lebanese people fighting for freedom. And then he said, oh, great. It's a good time to do it, because the lobbyists were working day and night. All these lobbyists that have been killed today, unfortunately, they were behind all the work that was done abroad. Gibran, Jubran Twaini, Samir Asir. I mean, these people did an amazing job in lobbying abroad. So the timing was right. People were shouting and asking for the right. The lobbies were pushing for it. And then George Bush was there and said, let's do it. And he kicked them out the second day. Today, we have almost the same scenario. We have Biden, who's new, an international policy that's going to change, and the pressure on the streets. All we need today is the lobby, and we need someone strong for the lobbies. If anyone knows Amal Clooney or can get to Amal Clooney to push for Lebanon, because Amal is someone who is extremely powerful. She has the image that Joe Biden would love to have on his side, and she's Lebanese, for God's sake. So we're trying to put pressure to find someone who knows her, someone who can reach out to her and say, this is your country, it's the right time to do something. We need the Lebanese card to be played now. And we can't do anything from here. Just like Dr. Jaha said, maybe, I think in a couple of weeks, we won't be reachable anymore. We're not gonna have internet.
Thank you, Maya, thank you. And Amal Clooney is on the list, maybe for a next event with you all. We'll see. I take note that Professor Jaha will have to leave us in maybe the next few minutes, but thank you so much for being with us today. I know you have such a busy schedule, but thank you again. We'd like to now move to a question and answer. So for everyone attending, please feel free to type in your question either in the chat or in the Q&A box. And you can also specify if it's directed to one of our speakers, but we did have a few questions in there, and I will just read them out loud, and maybe any of the speakers who want to pick it up. So we have a question from Nathalie Shahar on the idea of Lebanon's confessional system and how it has contributed to the lack of representation. And I think both Jumana and Carmen talked about this, but if you want to go more in depth. And we also have a few questions from Angela Glore, who asked both about the impact of COVID-19 on women, but also on the issue of the Lebanese citizenship. And how that, I know this is another debate by itself, it might need another webinar, but if any of you would like to talk about these two things. And there is one question on male engagement. I know probably we do have a few men on the webinar today, and we send them a special shout out. Thank you for being here. But maybe also if you can answer on how we can have more men as allies in this cause. Thank you.
There's a question on diaspora, though. No, Rania is saying, also sent it only the panelists.
No, we see it. So there is a question, a fourth question on the issue on whether the diaspora should be voting or not. There are maybe mixed feelings on this topic, but we'd also love to hear from you. Carmen, if you want to start, because I know you will be leaving, and then
just very quickly on diaspora. Look, diaspora tends to be a secondary identity. Don't think that you're voting based on your secondary identity. Think that you're voting for the right thing. It doesn't matter where you live. Diaspora communities all over the world, they get to vote. I understand this concern about if you're not experiencing a problem, you feel removed from it. But today we are global citizens and you have multiple identities. You can be Canadian and be Lebanese. Vote for the right thing. Don't accept that people live under so much tragedy that it's all avoidable. The humanitarian crisis that Maya talked about, it's avoidable. It's man-made. We're not a poor country. The port explosion wasn't a hurricane. Bunch of men placed explosives at the port. Bunch of men refused to form a government, refused to give women their right. We need to put pressure on these men, and you are part of it. Wherever you may live, in a pandemic today, we are sitting all together. We feel that we have citizenship just by being here. We care about the same things. So I would encourage you to vote. I apologize so much for having to leave, but you're in safe hands.
Bye, Carmen.
Thank you, Carmen.
Bye.
Bye. And you have amazing people running in Lebanon eventually, I think. And one of them is Jumana. Jumana, for example, was a huge breath of fresh air for us, even if things turned out sour. But she was, for us, she represented everything women want in Lebanon, all the hope of having someone who is intellectually balanced, and she's very solid emotionally. She's ready to take on a war that is like, I think, 1,500 years old. So this is the type of woman who will be present, I hope, for the next election. So You have her in front of you. Be
Thank
ready
you,
to
Maya.
vote, please.
It's really weird because I was thinking the same thing about you. So while you were talking.
I'm not in politics.
But thank you so much. I'm honored because I'm a big fan of everything you do. Let me pick up one question. I loved the question about men, but before that, I noticed from Rania another question regarding how the Lebanese diaspora is also sectarian, especially the older generation. Unfortunately, many of the Lebanese who left during the war have taken these divisions with them, and they nurtured them. And my answer to Rania is something that I've been doing lately, which helps me every time I feel frustrated or hopeless, which is quite often, I have to say. And it is focusing on the young generation. We have, I mean, as much as women are a big part of our revolution, the young generation is also the big driving force of this revolution. They want a different Lebanon. They want a Lebanon where their rights are respected, where they have dignity, where they have a minimum of human rights and services that their country should be providing for them. So let's focus on the young generation instead of just focusing on those who we cannot win. There are others that we can win or that we have already won. We just need to convince them to go and vote. One of the things that I also witnessed during my own campaign was how detached the young people were from politics. This has changed now. We have reached a point of awareness after the revolution that we cannot lose anymore. And young people are involved. They want to be involved. They believe in the future of this country. So we have to build on that, whether in the diaspora or inside the country. And regarding men, because I mean, I'm the mother of two feminist men who are proud to be feminists. Munir is almost 29 and Unsi is 21. Let me tell you that definitely men are an important ally in this struggle for equality and justice. And they would benefit as much as women from from taking that patriarchal system, because they are suffering because of it as well, even when they don't realize they are suffering. So many expectations from men, so much pressure, so much emotional terrorism is enforced upon them. So I do believe that men are an important part, and it's not about how we can convince them. I think that the decent ones are already joining forces with us, and everyone will end up realizing that this is the future. Yesterday, I was talking, because of Women's International Day, to a group of high school kids. And one of these school kids was 17, and he told me, well, I strongly believe that a woman's place is in the kitchen. I was really shocked because he said that. But then I realized that getting angry at him won't work. Preaching him won't work. So I tried as much as possible to be lenient and to take it as a joke. But we have a long way to go, and men have to be with us in this.
And don't forget that we're in a country where 42% of the population is below the age of 24, so which is exactly absolutely fantastic.
We have
yeah. Voila.
Thank you, ladies. That's a lot of food for thought. I see a lot of more questions coming in, so I'm going to ask one that just came in. Actually, it's the one on by Tanya Talaf. She's asking, should we start on a micro level, meaning should we run on a municipal level and then build our base through the work actually being done? So that's also this is also like a more of a leadership question, asking if we should start like local, so municipal, even like a civil society, and then gaining influence from there for change. What do you think is the best approach?
On this. I'm dealing a lot with the municipality now. Jumana she has more experience than me with this, so I think she's going to be more polite. I'm going to be super aggressive when it comes to the municipality.
Give it to us.
I have never in my life seen a form of corruption so bad and so low and so despicable like the municipality of Beirut, because their understanding of their work is not to the benefit of the citizens. This is the least of their concerns. It's not even there anyway. All they care about is making deals and having more and more money. And today they have gathered so much money that today they have over close to $1 billion stuck in the bank. So they refused to use this money because they were using the les intérêts, the interest on the money that they had put with the central bank. So imagine that they took our money hostage, they took our city hostage. And all of this started again. We always go back to the problem, to the root of the problem is the centralization of the power of the municipalities. So yes, we have to start at the municipality. It's bottoms up. We have to start grassroots, start with the people, knock at the doors of people and tell them you have the right to elect the president of the municipality. Most people in Lebanon, in Beirut especially, don't know that they have the right to do that. And the problem is in the 90s, again, with the Solidaire people, the first concern was to have the municipality, to have full control over the municipality so that they can build Solidaire and grow it the way they want. So what happened was that the president of the municipality ended up always being nominated. The so-called elections were ridiculous, just like they are anyway. For example, Jumana, I don't know for those who don't know, we all voted for Jumana. We all know that she won. It was announced on television, but yet next morning we woke up and then, oh, it was not Jumana. So this is how it goes in the municipality. People vote for someone, those who know that they can vote, they vote for someone, and then the next day someone else is appointed with a municipal board of people who are there strictly for their own interest. And this is how they killed our heritage. They destroyed the downtown, the heart of the city. And now anyway, karma is biting them back in the ass because it's a ghost town. Nothing is working. You don't feel that there's something called the citizen. And today it's these private initiatives that are putting their hand on the municipal board and saying, we are doing things now, and you are going to make it easy for us, or else we're going to the media. And this is how now we're able to do we're reopening some museums that were closed for a long time, besides the gardens, and we're working on sidewalks. We're working on 25 kilometers of sidewalks. Who does that in an NGO? So yes, we start with the municipality, and then little by little you have to decentralize so that every municipality has its own power in its own region.
Thank you for that, Maya. So yeah, basically we need to like put on our gloves, and us as citizens can mobilize and work as a collective. Thank you. We have one last question that we can answer. I'm trying to pick which one we could target. We have a question on education. How can we use education to tackle this? But also a question on the quota, the issue of the quota, because as you said, it is so important to be able to challenge people to ensure that women will enter the political realm through quotas. But then men will say that women were given this opportunity because of a quota, not because they deserved it or earned it. Like, how can someone address this? So I gave you two questions, and whatever one you feel like you would like to answer best or would be the most impactful.
Well, in a country like Lebanon, first of all, Maya, it's the first time that anyone calls me polite. Thank you for that.
I said more polite than me when it comes to the municipality.
It's a breath of fresh air. But anyway, I mean, in a country like Lebanon, where with all due respect, or without this. Most of those who are in the parliament aren't there because of merit. I don't think how anyone can dare speak of women getting there not because of their merit, but because of their of the quota. It's also not about just the quota on the lists. We have to have a quota on the results, which means that even if on the lists they have 30% women, it could, like I said in my intervention, they could put those women on seats that they know aren't going to win, unimportant seats. They can do that, and then we won't have any women. But the quota is indeed to ensure, because if we to ensure that women are represented, because if we wait on their good intentions, it's not going to happen. So many people in the parliament are there because they are the son of, the sister of, the brother of, etc., etc. It's become like a royalty. I mean, I understand political families. I mean, they are everywhere, but this is really over the top. It has nothing to do with democracy. We pretend we are a democracy, and it's not a democracy. So no, the women who will run, there are, so first of all, such a question also is a way to cast a doubt on the capacity of women in Lebanon to be involved in politics. There are so many women who would be amazing leaders in Lebanon. So I really resent this questioning of not having enough women who are there for merit. Definitely more than 30%. So yeah, it's gonna happen. We have to push for it. It's gonna happen, because if not, we're not gonna have more women in politics. And trust me, Maya, issues like period poverty isn't gonna be discussed anywhere except in organizations like yours. They wouldn't care. They're a bunch of men discussing men's issues and trying to, steal as much money.
Divide the pie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you.
So, thank you both. We are at the end of the session, and clearly there's never enough time to be able to discuss all.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, of course, please.
Just one, very quickly, someone asked about education. We're having a major alarming situation in Lebanon with education. Teachers are leaving. Parents, because of the blast and the pandemic, have lost their jobs temporarily, which means temporarily they're not able to pay the tuitions of their kids. And the problem is, since they're not paying, kids are being forced to start staying home. We have until now, only in the blast area, and all around Gemmayzeh, Mar Mikhael, and Jaitawi, we have identified these 11,955 students who are now sitting at home. We have 50,000 students identified by the UNICEF who have been removed from private schools and put into public schools. Public schools in Lebanon are a disaster. They're politicized, they're religious, they're horrible, and we need help with education. If just each student in Canada can help, for example, one student in Lebanon financially, or just give them online classes or anything, please do that, because it's really alarming and it's temporary. We're not talking about people who are poor from the start. These are middle-class people who temporarily lost their jobs and just need to cover 1 year of education until they find a job very soon.
Thank you for that. The speakers have given us so much food for thought. And if I were to just quickly summarize a few headlines, I know Carmen talked about supporting a rights-based approach through expertise, investing in institutions, including schools, youth centers, and hospitals. Jumana talked about the importance of having more women in politics, less sectarianism, having a feminist approach to the media, and holding the leaders accountable. And Maya touched on a humanitarian crisis that is fast approaching, including potentially food insecurity for a whole new generation, with a call that the diaspora takes more action and plays an active role. She rang the alarm on having too many children outside schools and mothers not being able to breastfeed. And turning it over to Rita to conclude.
Thank you. Just one last minute to finish. So just with everything that's been said, we're going to go back to the theme where as a call to action is we choose to challenge girls and women to run for leadership positions, and we will have the work speak for themselves. So yes, put in the quota, let them say they don't deserve it, but then the work will speak for itself. People are going to talk no matter what. Let the work speak for itself, and then the rest will come through. We choose to also challenge men to become allies and share the power in decision-making spaces. We choose to challenge men to join these spaces. And we do a shout out to the men that joined this space. Although unfortunately, it's still mostly women in the room, and most of these women listening already are converted. They already understand the importance of gender equality. So we need to ask our fathers, our brothers, our guy friends, any male that we know to come, even if we need to grab them by the hand to come join these spaces. And be more aware about what is happening, because they're half of the world population. So they are vital to this change. It's not just a woman's issue, it's a human rights issue that involves all of us. So lastly, we choose to challenge ourselves as well to keep empowering each other and being fearless and bold, and to stay big mouth, uncompromised, and unapologetic, like in the words of Jumana. And lastly, a fun fact that I heard Maya share in another podcast. She was saying that gender equality is smart economics, and that's something that we're studying. So gender equality isn't just good for human rights because we care about human rights. It's a smart business thing to do. So a lot of these men that care about business and they want the world to thrive, it's a smart business thing to do. If we're educating and empowering and allowing everyone in the world to have jobs, everyone will thrive. So it's a smart thing to do. So before we leave, we'd like to thank once again Dr. Carmen Jaha, Jumana Haddad, and Maya Shams Ibrahim Shah for making us believe that change can happen at all levels, including through people like us. Simple people like us, look at the change that we're making. Thank you to the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs for helping us organize this Women's Day event, and to every organization and person who shared and attended. We look forward to continuing this dialogue with all of you. Let's keep celebrating and empowering the women of the world today and every day. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day and a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.